Hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to be talking about stuff. And by stuff, I mean why you can't quit watching pornography. And to get into that, what I want to do is lead into a discussion of why most advice on YouTube, on the internet, on Reddit, wherever you're looking for advice on quitting pornography, why it doesn't work. And to lead into that, I want to give you a high-level overview of my story and what I went through in my addiction and what I discovered when I got into recovery about why mainstream advice for most people does not actually work. So let's get into it. Whenever I start my story, I always start in childhood because, surprise, surprise, most issues in life that are severe typically start in childhood. Now, I was raised in a very conservative evangelical Christian family, and I half jokingly tell people that the message that I got about sex growing up was that the only thing worse than murder was sex before marriage, and that God loved me more than anybody, and that I was definitely going to hell. And thirdly, that sex was simultaneously the most dangerous thing about me and the dirtiest thing about me and the thing that I was supposed to save for the person that I loved the most. So I grew up in an environment that had an enormous amount of sexual guilt and shame. I was also given this idea that God, the very source of my life and the foundation of reality itself, was very punitive and judgmental, and that being loved and being accepted was conditional on whether or not I could live up to a seemingly impossible standard of behavior. The next part of my story I share because of the number of people in recovery that I've met who share a very similar event at some point in their past. And this is when I was around 7-ish years old. I was sexually abused in the bathroom of my church. One night during service, I went into the bathroom and there was a slightly older boy there who was my friend, who started asking me a lot of sexually charged questions, and before I knew it, an event of sexual abuse had occurred. And I remember in the wake of that event, I made a decision that I was never going to tell anybody what had just happened to me for the rest of my life. And this was a moment for me when sex and shame became the same thing. I created a space inside of my heart where I was going to hide a version of myself that I deemed so unacceptable and so unlovable that nobody else had the right to see it. This decision, as I've learned in my years of working with people in recovery, was a very significant moment in the development of my addiction. It was the point where I created two versions of myself, one which I thought was acceptable and lovable by others, and another which I thought was so unlovable that I could not show it to anybody ever. A core part of my identity was now shame. Now, the reason that I go into that, as I just alluded to, is that in my years of recovery and working with people, I've discovered that probably 70 to 80% of people who struggle with some kind of compulsive sexual behavior in their life have an event or multiple events of sexual trauma in their childhood or adolescent years. Now, that could be some kind of outright sexual abuse or assault, or it could have been an instance of childhood sexual exploration that led to an abusive outcome, like what happened for me. It could have also been some kind of early exposure to pornography. Perhaps you walked in on one of your older siblings doing something with a girlfriend or boyfriend, or in some way you were sexualized or exposed to something very sexual at a relatively young age. Now, I want you to bookmark this and remember it because sexual trauma and these kinds of adverse developmental experiences play a significant role in the development of things like porn addiction or other kinds of sexually addictive or relationally addictive behaviors like love addiction or codependency. This isn't always true. There are exceptions to this rule, but in my experience, most people who suffer from some kind of sexually compulsive or relationally compulsive behavior have experienced some kind of trauma like this in their childhood. Now, my next major event occurs in about 5th grade when I'm 10 years old, and one of my best friends at the time came to me one day and told me that he had discovered something. And this something, as I would come to find out, was pornography. We went over to his house one day and he pulled it up on his family computer and showed me all sorts of websites to go to and how to delete my browser history so my parents couldn't find out if I decided to watch it at home. And that for me was a transformative moment. When I was watching that, I felt like I was getting insight and a look into this forbidden and taboo world of adults that I was not supposed to look at, both because I was too young, but primarily for religious reasons. The taboo element of what I was doing gave this experience a dopamine rush or some kind of high that made pornography instantly become a problem for me. My inner sexual shame combined with my religious upbringing and this traumatic sexual event that I had experienced just a couple years earlier laid the perfect foundation for pornography to become an addiction for me. Pornography went right alongside that traumatic sexual experience in this part of myself that nobody else was going to find out about. Now, fast forward over the next couple of years, and my usage of pornography starts to ritualize. I am finding out times at my house where I can watch it, where I'm not going to get caught. I am lying to my parents so that I can stay home from school and pretend that I'm sick so that I can watch pornography and play video games. And I start experiencing a compulsion to watch pornography. While on one hand, it was very exciting and was providing me a huge rush, I was also feeling tremendous amounts of shame and guilt from watching it. I developed a very intense desire to stop this behavior, primarily for religious reasons, but I could not do it. Around middle school, I started experiencing my first major consequences from porn use. I was experiencing a lot of social anxiety and shame. I had zero confidence. I was having difficulty focusing. My grades in school were slipping. I didn't really want to do anything except for play video games and watch pornography. I also started developing a big religious struggle at this time, as I was using the tools that I was given by the religion of my childhood to try to change my behavior unsuccessfully, and was only experiencing this getting worse and worse over time. I came to this conclusion that the reason why God wouldn't help me stop watching porn was either because God didn't exist or because God didn't love me and I wasn't worthy of being helped. And in my 12, 13-year-old mind at the time, I kind of ran with both. Now, around age 13 in 8th grade, I'd made a decision that I was going to do whatever it took to get pornography out of my life for good. And this began what I now call in hindsight the decade of white knuckling. If you imagine holding a steering wheel extremely tight, trying to control your life, you get white knuckles, hence white knuckling. I was desperately trying to control my porn use. I was desperately trying to change my own behavior by using my willpower, my discipline, some kind of source of inner strength. And I did absolutely everything that I could think of to quit watching pornography to no avail. I read every self-improvement book that I could get my hands on, from The Power of Now to The Power of Habit. I meditated, I took cold showers, I exercised, I went for runs. I went on all the recovery forums, I watched all the videos. I consumed all of the posts on Reddit's r/nofap. I went on YouTube, I watched all the videos, and I even signed up for some of the earliest versions of porn addiction recovery courses. I meditated more, I journaled more, I took cold showers, I did push-ups when I had an urge, I made all sorts of rules about where I was allowed to bring my devices and what time of day I was allowed to go on them, what websites I was allowed to go on and not allowed to go on. At one point, I even started doing urge rehearsal meditations where I decided to practice saying no to the urge to watch pornography by sitting down on my phone and practicing the stages that led up to a relapse and saying no at points closer and closer to relapse. So at first it was sitting on my bed and just feeling the urge and saying no and putting my phone away from me and walking away. And then it was, I have my phone in my hands and then I say no, put my phone down and I walk away. And then I'm typing in a URL and then I erase it and I say no and I get up and I walk away. Like when I tell you I have done everything that I could think of, I mean it. I went through all of the journaling prompts. I thought, oh, maybe I can't quit watching porn because I'm just not using the right journal prompts, or I'm not doing the right kind of meditation, or I just need to pray more, or I need to take another cold shower challenge, or I need to exercise more often, or I need to have a more strict sleep schedule. Everything in my life that was within my control to change, I changed. I was repeatedly trying the strategy of increasing and adding strength to a muscle that showed consistently that it did not have the power to get me to stop watching pornography. But I kept doubling down. I kept doubling down. I kept doubling down. I kept doubling down. And none of it was working. And throughout this decade, I also began a series of very dysfunctional attempts at relationships. I had a very nice guy, anxious, codependent attachment style that basically suffocated every relationship that I got in before it could even take off and get off the ground. I was so entrenched in feelings of shame and insecurity, and I was looking for that sense of worth to come from the women that I was dating, and it pushed every single woman away from me. I was so stuck in this idea that I was some kind of broken, bad, unworthy person, and I was constantly looking to the women that I was dating to be the source of that worthiness that I felt like I didn't have. Similar to the sexual abuse event that I mentioned earlier, part of the reason why I bring that up is because almost everybody that I've worked with in recovery, myself included, who suffer from some kind of sexual compulsion or some kind of sexually addictive behavior like porn addiction, also suffer from codependency. Now, there's an Easter egg here in your recovery journey, which I will partially spoil for you, which is that these things like codependency or the nice guy syndrome, which is basically just a male version of codependency or a traditionally male expression of codependency, actually lie underneath things like pornography addiction usually. They are closer to the foundational problem that is driving addictive behavior than the addictive behavior itself. I will go way deeper into that in future videos, so stay tuned. Now, my last holdout in my journey of trying to do things on my own was sex. I thought I just needed to get into a healthy sexual relationship and my problems with pornography would disappear. I just need a girlfriend. That's gonna fix all my problems. That's what I thought. And now fast forward to when I actually had sex for the first time. It was the most disillusioning experience of my life, and not in any way, shape, or form on the part of the girl. It was completely me. I was incapable of showing up emotionally. I felt robotic. I could not show up emotionally. I could not feel intimate. I could not feel connected to this girl. I felt completely emotionally empty, and I also suffered from sexual dysfunction. Now, this experience broke me in a very important way because this was the one thing that I had not tried. It was the one thing that I thought this entire time was going to magically fix me and make my problems with pornography go away. Around that time, I began working with an addiction therapist, and he mentioned 12-step groups, and I thought, I have nowhere else to go. I might as well show up to a meeting and try. And I walked into a meeting and I heard my story pour out of everybody's mouth around me, except for many of these people had years or decades free from porn addiction or some other kind of sexually addictive behavior. And now here's where we get to the point of this video, because I learned some of the most important recovery lessons that now serve as the foundation of my recovery. The first and most important lesson is that addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder. All of these recovery strategies that focus on what we could call fortification of the individual, and that's to say, trying to make you more disciplined, have better willpower, to have a higher moral code, to encourage you to make better decisions, to think more clearly, to be stronger physically or mentally in some kind of way, to gain more self-knowledge or self-awareness, or anything that has to do with changing you into some kind of more disciplined, willful person, universally fail to help people who are recovering from legitimate addiction. And yet this is basically what everybody advocates for on the internet when it comes to quitting pornography. You just need to have better discipline. You need to develop better willpower by taking cold shower challenges or doing extremely difficult things in your life. And while there is absolutely value to doing things like that, it's not going to fix or cure your addiction. Trying harder will not get you where you need to go. If kicking your ass was going to work, it would have worked already. Or you just need to have sex. You just need to get a girlfriend, and then all of your porn problems are just magically going to go away. Plot twist. The majority of people that I have worked with in my coaching business, and a significant percentage of the people that I know in recovery, have come to me while they're in relationships. I promise you that getting into a relationship will not fix you. These core issues that cause things like addiction cannot be fixed by another person. So if porn addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder, what actually is it? And I'm going to answer this by asking you to consider a statement, which is that porn is not your problem. Almost everybody who gets into recovery has this mindset. My problem is that I don't have enough willpower, and my solution is to get pornography out of my life for good, and then everything will be fine. If I could only quit porn, then I could focus, then I wouldn't feel so socially awkward and avoidant, then I would regain my confidence, then I would magically have amazing dating and relationship skills and be able to get the girlfriend, boyfriend, or partner that I want. Then I would have a positive outlook on life, then I would feel connected and like I belong, like my life had meaning and purpose, the list goes on. While quitting pornography definitely can help with some of these things, especially the improved mental clarity, the improved sense of confidence and stuff like that, but I promise you, if you try to just get rid of pornography without addressing the profound emptiness, loneliness, disconnection, and purposeless and meaninglessness in your life, it will just keep coming back like a trick candle. The reality is that your addiction or problems with pornography are just the tip of an iceberg. Underneath the surface, propping the entire addiction up, lies not just some kind of severe physical dependency, but a lifetime of dysfunctional personality and character traits, bad habits, choices, and ingrained behaviors, unhealed trauma and family of origin wounds, dysfunctional mindsets and belief systems, other mental health issues, a deep sense of disconnection from others, from ourselves, and from life, relational and intimacy issues, and a kind of existential or spiritual emptiness or loneliness. And all of these things can combine together to form this profound core of pain, which our addiction to pornography has actually appeared to help us manage. What I want you to take away from this video is that your problems with pornography are not coming from a lack of willpower. Your problems with pornography are primarily coming from a lack of connection. Professionals who study pornography and sex addiction have actually said that sexual addiction and pornography addiction in particular are so related to dysfunctional forms of connection that it's rightfully considered an intimacy disorder. The reality of your situation is that you are living some kind of life that you are using pornography to escape, whether it's in small ways or it's in large ways. In some way, your life is so unmanageable or painful that you are driven compulsively back to pornography to find the relief, pseudo-connection, and emotional self-soothing that you're unable to find in healthy avenues in your life. You're unable to find the intimacy, connection, and love that you need in your ordinary life, so you turn to their closest substitute. You are turning to porn because you are unfathomably bored with your life. You are lacking any real sense of connection to meaning and purpose. You're watching porn because you're extremely lonely and ashamed of yourself and haven't taken the time to cultivate relationship and dating skills that would enable you to experience a fulfilling, intimate, loving dating life. Perhaps you're watching porn because you're completely emotionally locked down and stifled. Perhaps you're watching porn because you're emotionally stifled and you haven't healed the trauma and family of origin wounds from your past and cultivated the skills to be able to feel and express your own emotions authentically in relationship with others. Perhaps you're watching porn because you're depressed and you don't have goals or a life that you actually want to engage with. You're living a life that you don't want to be a part of. Perhaps you're watching porn because you have a hole in your soul that is filling you with a refrigerator hum in the background of existential anxiety, loneliness, and discontent, and you haven't done the spiritual work necessary to discover why you feel so disconnected, separate, alone, and wallowing in meaninglessness. In order to help somebody recover from porn addiction or any kind of dependency, every single one of these factors that I just mentioned has to be addressed. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. The goal of recovery is not for you to simply stop watching pornography to gain enough willpower to say no to it. It is for you to cultivate a life that you no longer feel the need to escape. When most people get into recovery, not only are they starting out with this idea that they're suffering from some kind of willpower deficiency disorder, but they also think that the solution is to simply fight their addiction. All of their mental energy and their bandwidth is focused on trying to not watch pornography. But people who are deeply recovered are actually just living a life that is so meaningful, enriching, and engaging that they don't have any bandwidth to consider watching porn or not watching porn. Anything related to pornography is simply no longer something that occupies their mind. They have done the work and taken the action necessary to not only transform their life, but to transform who they are into becoming the kind of person who simply no longer watches pornography. This identity level transformation is what lies at the core of effective recovery. But most importantly, this person also realizes that the power that they'd always been looking for in order to halt their addiction and heal their life did not come from them alone. It actually came from connection. It came from reconnecting to themselves, to their emotions, to their trauma and unhealed wounds. It came from connecting to others and learning how to build effective relationship and intimacy skills. And it also came from reconnecting to a larger sense of belonging to life or God or whatever spiritual framework works for you. Now, in my active addiction, I kept journals from 2016 to 2019 where I recorded basically every time that I had a relapse. And each one of these entries either represented a single instance where I relapsed and acted out or watched pornography, or it represented many, many times that I had watched pornography before I finally decided to sit down and write in the journal. And every single entry in this journal was a scream to try harder and to double down on the strategy of just becoming a more disciplined, willful person. Now, I've been trained formally as an engineer and a scientist, and we say in science that 3 data points makes a trend. Over the course of 2016 to 2019, in these relapse journals, I had 105 entries. And each one of these entries was a doubling down on this idea that all that I needed in order to improve my life and my situation was to try harder. I just needed to rely on myself. When you hear me talk about insanity and the insanity of addiction in future videos, this is what I'm talking about. We find ourselves in these crazy situations where we are doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. Now, if you are somebody who, like me, has found yourself repeatedly going through this cycle of thinking that all you need to do to quit watching pornography and to level up your life and to get the relationship you want is to try harder, and yet you find yourself in this cycle of intense regret, remorse, shame, and anger after relapsing to pornography, and an intense desire to quit and get it out of your life, followed by a short period of massive action in terms of taking cold showers or living up to the discipline that you're aspiring to, only to find yourself days or weeks, or let's be real, sometimes minutes or hours later with this perverse twist of mind that occurs that convinces us somehow that watching pornography is once again a good idea. If your experience has shown you that this plan of just trying harder is not working for you, and if some part of you knows deep down that you need some kind of support and connection, then what I want you to do is go down into the bio below, and I want you to click on that link and schedule a call with me. I'm so excited to get to talk with you, to work with you, to break you free from pornography, and to help get you to a place where you are living a truly meaningful, fulfilling, amazing life. I hope you got value from this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.